Good evening, Dr. Sharam, Dr. and Edmin, and all our friends from India, Iran, and other countries. Very good evening and very good day for all. So today I'm here to present about EHP management and mitigation strategies. We all know that already all the producing countries, especially like India, we are suffering severely with EHP. The productions are coming day by day. Productions are becoming very difficult for the farmers. So my presentation today would focus only on EHP and how we are going to handle the situation once it is inside the farm. So to introduce about myself, I am Madhu Talluri. I am a microbiologist and we have a laboratory in Kakinada, Andhra Pradesh, India by the name SGS Aqua Solutions. So I am here in this field for the past 23 years and I have experience inside the lab and farm. I am not any doctorate. I am just a field technician like any of our friends here. So most of my presentation is drawn from expert presentations and reviews from various research articles and my own experiences and our experiences shared by our friends. So hope that this would be a very simple presentation where we can get insight about EHP and its behavior on farm and how to handle for the farmer. So let me start with the presentation. I think I will be sharing my screen here, so it would be easy. So, uh, let me start now. So, getting to the geographical distribution of EHP, it is way long since 2001. It has been reported in Thailand. Especially the first case has been demonstrated in Monodon when the situation is worse and they have very slow growth in Thailand. They were studying the possibilities of virus having associated with MSGS, Monodon slow growth syndrome. But ultimately, it has led to the discovery of this else. Microsporidium infecting the farms of Monodon way back in 2001 in Thailand. Later on, they identified that this is a fungal disease and they labeled it as enterocytosis hepatopenia in the year 2004. And if you see the geographical distribution, it is almost everywhere in all these major shrimp producing countries like India, Vietnam, China, Thailand, and even recently in 2021 it has been reported from Korea also, and there is even in Venezuela there were reports. So because of this disease, it is mostly ignored because in India we have seen this in the year 2015 itself, but it was reported only in the year 2016. So that 1 year where we were not very serious about testing the disease in the broodstock entering the country, we somehow missed the opportunity, and the disease has entered into India by the next 1 or 2 years. Even it looks like most of the report says that EHP has been there in all these countries long before, whereas after the continuous expansion, after the continuous expansion of the farms and increasing densities of Vanamai, so it has taken its own sweet time and suddenly it has emerged as a major disease by 2015. So, what is this enterocytosis hepatopenia? What is its biology? Basically, everybody knows this. This information you can get from the internet itself. So, I will go a bit quickly here. So, you can see this is an egg-shaped, oval-shaped, egg-shaped spore. So, the spore is formed, and this is the extracellular spore. So, you can see this one is considered as a fungal parasite and microsporidia. This is a oval shaped spore, very small in size, like 1.1 into 0.7 micrometer. It is non-motile. And the major thing what we have to notice for this EHP spore is it is made up of two layers of spore wall. So the first one is exospore, which is having rich in protein. Most of the spore wall proteins which recognize the host associate on this exospore. And there is a very strong chitin like endospore. So these two spore walls are very strong, and they are the one which is protecting the spore from all these treatments and environmental disorders. So we can see that these spores are very strong and highly resistant. And one thing we have to notice here is only this spore is the only infective stage. Actually, this lies in various stages once it enters into the host cell. But outside the host cell, extracellular is only spore form, and it is the only stage which can infect a host. So coming to the host, what all hosts are susceptible for EHP, we can see the first one is monodon. Many people, even our friends in India, feel that monodon doesn't have EHP, but yes, monodon is the first to get affected by EHP, and it is there in a long back also. But we were having not enough disease at that time, and very recent past, we are seeing diseases associated with monodon also. EHP is currently being diagnosed in monodon also. So this is one part where we have to seriously consider. Then there is Vanamai, Styloristis, and Japonicus. Carriers, these are all mechanical carriers. Polychaetes are known to be like physical carriers. There are even mechanical carriers, in which they don't carry inside the body, but they still carry above the body as a mechanical carrier. So polychaetas, artemias, mollusks, squid. Even inside the farm, we can see a lot of snails, even grasshoppers, any soil surfaces, whatever. So these spores are going to reside on the surfaces, and they are going to become the mechanical carriers. So what is the route of transmission? It is fecal oral route. That means the spores are released through the fecal matter of the infected animal, and the same spores, when consumed accidentally or incidentally by an animal which is consuming feed or debris from the pond, it can accidentally ingest that spores. So this is fecal oral route. So one thing what we have to consider here is nowadays we have to seriously think about the gastrointestinal tract. Most of the infections, like Dr. Ravi Kumar Garu already he explained regarding HPND, so that is also correlated with this disease because both the diseases are associated with gastrointestinal tract. So shrimp health currently depends upon what it is eating and how it is assimilating and how it is excreting from the body. So health depends on this gastrointestinal tract, what the animal is consuming and what the animal is excreting. So for this EHP, the target organ is hepatopancreas, which is considered as the energy hub. Okay, so this is hepatopancreas, and why we call it an energy hub? Because hepatopancreas plays key role in synthesizing and secreting digestive enzymes, which are very important for feed consumption and digestion, absorbs and transport nutrients to the tissues, metabolism of lipids and carbohydrates, and storehouse of energy for supplying during molting or during body repair. So it's like a major storehouse where the food is being consumed, digested, assimilated, stored for enough reserves for the future requirements. It is the energy hub. And EHP or AHP, they are going to target this hepatopancreas. That is why we can see these are the major problems nowadays. And how this EHP is going to interact with the host cell. So once it enters into the hepatopancreatic cell, they're having a specific protein like heparin binding proteins on the spore wall, which recognize heparin present on the hepatopancreas. See, these are the hepatopancreatic cells, and you can see heparin molecules above the surface of the epithelial cells. So once the spores have this EHP spore wall protein, they recognize this heparin, and that is the way of entry for this pathogen. So even in the biological cycle inside the host cell, they have many parameters to meet for the spore to really due to the polar tube extrusion. So that includes like calcium, change in pH, polyanions, cations, anions. So there are many physico-chemical parameters which help for this EHP to release the polar tube. So polar tube extrusion is the only way how it is going to infect the host cell. So if you see the host EHP life cycle, it's very simple. So here it is the spore and the polar tube is coiled inside with high tension. And once it recognizes the host cell, it releases the polar tube. And through the polar tube, the sporoplasm or the infective material is sent into the host cell. So earlier I have explained you the spores lies in the environment or extracellular, only one phase, that is the infective phase. Only spores in the environment or extracellular spores only can survive all this environment and whatever treatments we do. So they can sustain because they stand in the spore and extracellular. But once the host cell is affected, mean it is infected with the sporoplasm, inside the host cell it proliferates. One spore when multiplied to thousands of spores, and it has various stages like plasmodial stages, trophozoite, sporozoite stages. So everything happens inside the cell. This is the problem with EHP, because outside the cell it remains very resistive to whatever treatments we do, and inside the cell it is sensitive, but it has protection by the host cell. It is inside the host cell. It is basically an intracellular parasite, so it is escaping all the treatments whatever we can try. So this is the major hiccup while they're trying to give treatment for EHP. So once inside the host cell, what happens is this particular pathogen doesn't have energy mechanism. It doesn't have its own energy mechanism. It is a simple spore, but once this spore enters into the host cell, you can see these are the mitochondria. So inside the host cell, this particular sporoplasm enters into the replication procedure where it undergoes huge replication, but it utilizes all the mitochondria inside the host cell to assist this proliferation. So what happens is mitochondria are nothing but the energy cells. They are the ones which produce energy required by the host to survive, to molt, to grow, and to repair the body. So all these procedures are helped by these mitochondria. So what happens is these mitochondria are majorly consumed, I mean they are majorly drawn by this proliferation, and the energy is being utilized by this spore. So what will be the consequences if it happens like this? First and foremost thing is, because it is lacking the production of digestive enzymes, shrimp loses its appetite. So there will be a loss in feed consumption. So you can see feed reduction outright in the check trace. So there will be indigestibility. Even if you see some of the population is having good feeding, but the feed cannot be, I mean, the nutrients cannot be assimilated into the body because of the lack of proper mechanism from the hepatopancreas. So ultimately, what the shrimp becomes a little bit weaker. So until then, how this natural and normal microbiota inside and outside the body of the shrimp, they start taking advantage of this poor health condition of the animal, and they turn the entire microbiota can turn into pathobiome. So that those bacteria become opportunistic, and they take this advantage of this weak condition of the animal, and they start infecting the body. So that is a condition where the normal biota becomes pathobiome. So until this condition, everyone, including the farmers and technicians, what we have to remember and understand carefully is these conditions until this case can be reversible. So we can try any prophylactic treatments like you do growth promoters, you do bile acids, you do probiotic, whatever you are trying to improve the health condition of the animal, you can try until this extent. So after this, what happens is, as Dr. Ravi Kumar Garu explained, I have to borrow his word that 1 + 1 = 11. So the problem doesn't remain with 1 and 1. So you cannot say that only EHP is the problem. EHP can associate various obligatory pathogens, various opportunistic pathogens, and it will play together. It is a complex disease where it takes help of various microorganisms, and they all work together, and they will further damage the tissue. So what happens is the hepatopancreatic cells become slowing, and they will be excreted through the intestine as white feces. That is what we see as white gutter and white feces. So during this phase, what happens is you can see that excessive loss of energy. So because of lipid drain, that's why these white feces start floating onto the surface of water, because they're rich in lipids. So these lipids can carry these white feces above the water level. So they start floating there, and ultimately the animals turn into loose shell. The muscle cannot remain strong anymore. So they turn into loose shell, and you will see random mortality and survival loss. So if you prolong the culture from here on, you may see a lot of survival loss. And this condition after this part is called irreversible, because once there is white feces in the pond, that particular population which is having white feces are going to be dying very soon. You cannot really turn them back. So you have to consider this. EHP infection happens in two phases. During the first phase, we can try where the situation can be reversed, but in the second phase, it is untreatable. So, friends, we cannot really treat white feces outright once you have severe outbreak of white feces and lucial in the farm. So this is the mechanism of infection. So what happens is you can see a healthy shrimp, then there are EHP spores in the pond. So once they enter into the pond by accidentally, this is because fecal oral route. This shrimp, while eating the feed or collecting feed from the debris from the bottom of the pond, they can accidentally or incidentally they'll pick up the spores from the pond, which are excreted by the other infected animal. So they gain entry into the pond and into the animal and sit in the hepatopancreas. So once they start functioning, like earlier I explained, the opportunistic pathogens which are inside the body as normal biota, they turn themselves into pathogens. So once this both EHP and opportunistic pathogens work together, you can see that cell sloughing. This is how we explain now, and you can see that the intestine is filled with white gut, and the same is excreted as white feces. So after this phase, after continuous loss of energy through white feces and white gut, the animal becomes little weak, discolored, and lucial. This animal is very inactive. You can see in the check trace, and later on, this animal is going to die if we continue the culture for a long time. But one point here is this is a progressive disease. It's not that 1 lakh, if you have 1 lakh animal in the pond, not all the animals may have this infection. You may have only like 500 to 600 animals in the initial phase. So what happens is those 500 to 600 animals pass all this through cycle and they ultimately die, which you doesn't even notice as there is mortality in the pond. But this is a progressive disease. What happens is these 600 animals can transfer the spores and spores to further to the next population, where the infection spreads to more than 10% of the total. From 600, it may raise, the infection level may raise up to 10,000 numbers in the pond. So that depends. How this progress, how this disease is progressing depends on incidence and prevalence of white feces. If you see like white feces coming and reducing for a while, and then white feces enters again, you can notice that this has entered into the next phase, and it is going to take away another set of population. So incidence and prevalence are the key factors. So we have to understand that this enters through fecal oral route. So as the animals, infected animals get bigger and bigger in the pond, they excrete more and more EHP spores, and the more of the population may get infected if we prolong for a long time. So this entire cycle may take like 1 to 3 weeks, like from the healthy shrimp getting infected and until it goes to blue shell and ultimately dying. This may take like 1 week to 3 weeks based on the physical condition inside the pond and its immunity. So once in 3 weeks, like 1 or 2 weeks, you may lose survival starting from 5 to 10% every cycle. So that depends. Every technical person has to understand that how to handle this population once they have severe white feces. You prolong the culture for longer period, you may lose more survival. So what are the signs and symptoms which are visibly noticeable? We don't see much growth within 20 to 35 days. So expected that by 20 or 30 days, we may reach 4 grams when we stock directly for PL10, but we may not reach that size. Most of the farms lies with 1.5 grams, and expected consumption of feed will be very, very less. As per the program and schedule, if you are supposed to feed like 25 to 30 kg, but the consumption will be very less, like only 10 to 15%. And one more thing is continuous drop in feed intake. So it happens like in general, what happens is there will be a reduction in feed intake for 1 or 2 days in most of the cases, which happens due to climatic changes, molting cycle, and various reasons which everybody knows. But with this case, what happens is there will be continuous drop in feed intake, like starting from 30 kg, 25 kg, 20 kg, 18 kg, and 10 kg. It would be very difficult to pick up again. So this is one major symptom which we can notice with EHP. Then abnormal size variation, which all of our friends knows. and loose shell, which happens very early, like 40 to 50 DOC itself, we can see loose shell entering into the pond. So there will be white feces floating around. It starts with white colour. And this white feces, I say, recurring. So this is very important. So we can see early white feces within 30 days, 40 days, you may notice white feces floating above. You use any medicine or you don't use any medicine also. After 1 week or 10 days, this white feces is going to reduce. You may not see much white feces. Then after 10 days, it is going to recur once again heavily. So this is one major symptom. We have to remember this. So you can see the next stage would be these loose shell, lethargic and discolored animals. When you cut open and see the hepatopancreas, it may become pale, weak, and very soft, sometimes very rubberish also, very tight also. So they become cannibalistic. You can see the dead animals. And there is a opaque muscle. This is one very good symptom when we see for EHP and Vibrio associate together. So there will be cannibalism, and moreover, you can see random or severe mortality, especially in summer seasons. We can see this outright a lot of white feces and running mortality together. So definitely survival is going to less. Many papers publish that there should be no mortality for EHP, but I don't agree with that. There is mortality, but may not be directly associated with the pathogen, but the symptoms of pathogen, mean the consequences of this infection can lead to severe mortality if we didn't handle the situation properly. So how this infection is going to enter? It can enter through the soil because it is already contaminated in the environment. Most of the farms are infected now. In the water, because we drain the water into open channels like creeks and sea. So we can see it can enter through water, but primarily because of seed, whatever the reason, initial days it has entered through the seed. So one have to take very much care to avoid EHP entering to the seed, and feed especially in the hatcheries where they feed these live polychaete worms. This is the main channel where it can enter into the system. And carriers, like I say, mechanical carriers, you can say polychaetes, you can say snails, you can say mollusks, whatever inside the pond, even some kind of zooplankton, they can mechanically carry these spores and they can further contaminate the coming crops. So inside in the hatchery, how this is going to enter, you may have SPF broodstock. I believe that most of the hatcheries are doing well with SPF broodstock, but as long as they feed them with live polychaete worms, wild caught polychaete worms, it can enter into the system through these polychaete worms. And even though we can stop this, even the infection, we can stop this with proper egg washing. If they do the proper egg washing, you can physically eradicate EHP from entering into the next stage. So it can enter through any of the stages. Like you can stop, like from the polychaete to the broodstock, you can stop even by doing proper egg wash, or even through proper management in the hatchery system. So what happens is, how we are going to check this is, most of the people, we have to check this seed whether it is free of EHP or not by PCR. But the point is, most of the PCR samples what we receive here, they are negative, and inside the farm within 20 days they have infection, and they complain that that PCR is not able to diagnose EHP. So this is not correct. I want everyone to understand this. EHP can be diagnosed properly by PCR, but only thing is we have to take care of sampling also, because the process and the sampling both are very, very important. So for especially for PCR, when you are collecting sample for a particular disease, you cannot go with random sampling. So random sampling means you just collect a pool of sample. It is not advisable for disease diagnosis. So we have to go for a biased sampling. So what is meant by biased sampling? You, for example, you take a pool of PLs, you put in a tub and you rotate them. You can see this, everybody knows that the weaker animals go and settle in the center of the tub. So these weak animals have a potential, have a chance of having infection. So we have to only collect the weakest animals for PCR. So this is only to bring all that chances of getting positive if there is any infection. So what we have to do is, you take the weakest animal from the hatchery, then you stress the sample, you pack them without oxygen, with a bit of ammonia. You just pack them without feed so that they can eat others fecal matter and let them contaminate themselves within the population. So what happens is, if they themselves, you can get increased prevalence and probability, because you see here I gave an example. This entire population, only one animal is infected animal, so it is very difficult to really get the probability of diagnosing the disease. So what we have to do is, from our side, we have to take the right sample and stress them and increase the probability as much as possible. So you can take as a fecal sediment also, because it is a pooled sample and you have a lot of feces. There would be spores residing in the feces. It would be advisable if you collect a separate fecal sediment. And at least one important thing is, we have to test at least one PCR test for 1 million population. So most of the hatcheries can carry up to 1.5 to 2 millions of seed, and you cannot simply test a day before packing or the same day of packing and collect the seeds. You have to spend some time. You have to test once or twice, and you have to take as multiple samples to get the right result. So one single test is, it's like it become a very simple thing. It's not advisable like that. So if you are collecting sample from the grow-out pond, I want all the farmers to remember this. We have to always collect the suspect or weak animal for PCR test. You bring animals from the chick tray or cast net, they may be healthy, and from a population of 1 or 2 lakhs in your pond, it may not be a positive for EHP. So always, whenever you are collecting, when you suspect something is wrong with your population, you have to identify the suspect animal and send at least 2 or 3 is also okay. No need to send like hundreds of animals, but to collect the right animal and send the right sample so PCR can detect. So I everyone to understand that sampling is going to play a key role, especially for EHP detection. This happens with any disease, not EHP, not white spot, not COVID or HIV, for any disease, we have to take the right sample. So I want everyone to believe and understand that PCR can detect at any PL stage. Mostly in India, we have a wrong notion that early PL cannot be detected. People wait for a bigger size PL, or because they believe that native PL once stopped in the pond within 20 days they got infected. They think that PCR is not suitable for smaller PL, but it is completely wrong. So we can detect if you collect the right sample, and if your process in the lab, if you take your sample to a good lab and they have a good extraction protocol and detection kit, they can detect. So PCR can detect. We have to agree with this. And a lower CT value, that means that there is high number of DNA, target DNA. So it doesn't in any way reflect the severity of disease in the population. If you bring one animal and the CT value is 15 or 20, it says that that particular animal is having very high level of infection. Whereas your entire population may be better than this animal, but we cannot judge severity only by CT. CT helps us to understand the condition and severity, but you cannot determine exact severity only by CT value. So coming back to how we are going to handle this. So this is a very important slides which I got from Mahidol University, from the presentations of Dr. Kalaya Madam. So this is very, very important information. These kind of treatments has been suggested because they studied in the lab, and they found out that the various parameters, like you give temperature at minus 20 degrees for 2 hours, and 70 degrees for 10 minutes, both are very effective in inhibiting the EHP spores. And same thing at a high pH, like above 9. So you can use calcium oxide or sodium hydroxide, both are same. So you use at very high pH. There is no specified contact time by madam, but if the pH is above high, what happens is, here it is not spore inhibition, but the polar tube extrusion happens. So this is, as I earlier told you, spore is the only form of infective stage. So once this polar tube extrusion happens, it cannot be infective anymore. So polar tube extrusion, if it happens with the host cell only, it can be infective. Without the presence of host cell, if polar tube is extruded, it becomes useless and the spore will die. So the next treatment is acid. Low pH, like less than 4.5, also is very good in inhibiting spore. And chlorination, you can choose, because I don't only suggest 65% chlorine. Further I will explain you. But if you have a 65% active chlorine, you can do like 40 ppm for 15 minutes or 10 ppm for 24 hours. So contact time is very important. So you can, if you want to cost control, you can reduce your dosage and you can increase the contact time. So it can help in achieving better results. So potassium permanganate for 15 minutes at 15 ppm. Formalin, that is formaldehyde 200 ppm, and the time contact time is not specified from the paper. We can get further information. And I also request if any of our gentlemen knows here, they can share on later on. So ethanol 20% for 15 minutes. All these are different treatment methods suggested in vitro, in the lab. In the lab, they were proven to be excellent and working good. 100% is achieved. But only thing is the same cannot be attributed to the farm because lab is different from the farm. But we have to consider these doses and treatment timings. So for those who doesn't, who don't understand what is ppm, I mentioned here, ppm is 1 gram or 1 ml per 1 ton of water. So I think your technicians can explain. So handle with care. This is very important because most of the temperatures, see very high temperatures, then caustics and calcium oxides, very high pH, acid, very, highly burning thing, and highly oxidative chlorine, potassium permanganate. See, once we are handling all these strong chemicals, we have to be very much careful while we are handling them in the farm. So how we suggest, why I always suggest to go with dry treatment. Your pond must be dry if you want to treat EHP effectively, because the soil is having EHP in the inside the soil, so it has to really absorb the chemical whatever treatment we are giving. So sun dry as long as possible, not less than 30 days. You can wait up to 2 or 3 months also, no problem. But most of the people believe that long drying can eradicate EHP. No, you wait for longer time. Even after 1 year, EHP can still survive without moisture, without host. EHP can survive in the soil. So waiting for longer time doesn't help. But wait for long time and go for a treatment, it will help. So then you plow and scrap out of the premise, because the sludge from the previous crop which is carrying spores has to be removed. Most of the farmers put them on the dike side. It is not at all suggestible. We have to move this away from the campus, above outside the compound. Then you have to apply burnt lime up to 6 tons per hectare, and then you moist it. This is very important. Immediately after application, you moist them to raise the pH, and then you can wait for 3 days. So the second alternative method is applying caustic soda, which I don't suggest everyone to do this unless you have serious problem. So you can try this, but with proper care, because caustic, it is very corrosive. We have to be very careful. So you have to prepare like 4,000 ppm. That means 4 kgs of caustic mixed with 1 ton of water and sprayed all over the pond. So when you are spraying, expect that this liquid reaches at least 2 to 3 centimeters, at least 4 to 6 centimeters deep into the pond. Then wait for a day, and then you go for a HCl application like 4,000 ppm, even a chlorine application of 4,000 ppm. So once we do so much of treatment, we know that we are harming the soil. Soil may lose its natural characters. So we have to go for some good organic composting. So maybe you can get help of your technician who can explain you better. You can use like neem powder, mineral mixtures, zinc, soil probiotics. You do. So for those conditions where drying is not possible, most of the ponds, because of the neighboring pond seepage or rainy season, for various reasons, the pond cannot be dried properly. So you have an alternative method which is less effective. Dry soil treatment is very, very effective, better effective. Whereas in the wet condition, what happens is the soil is already saturated with whatever parameters of your water. So whatever you apply, your water will get the treatment, but the bottom soil may not receive the same treatment. So you have to apply, as per madam's recommendation, it is 250 liter per formalin or 20 kgs of potassium permanganate. So you have to keep your water level very low, like less than 1 feet, so that the bottom is covered, and then you give a good dose of treatment. So you can wait for 2 or 3 days. This would be helpful. You no need to discard this water. You can pump into the same water and you can proceed. After this, you can try HCl acid like 120 liters per acre and chlorine at 40 ppm. See, these are all not standard, fixed values. Your staff, your field staff technicians can help you to decide. I will explain this. So I try to put what would be the cost of treatment, because all these treatment costs are going to be very expensive. So I put like this. In India, we have to do around 6 tons per hectare of burnt lime. So this is per hectare. It is going to cost you almost 42,000 rupees per hectare. Whereas caustic can be much effective. It can raise pH beyond 9, whereas burnt lime can give you only like in India 9.5 pH as a maximum. Whereas caustic can give you like 12.5 pH on the soil at a very low cost. So I prefer this better than this. But again, that is individual choice based on your pond condition. Whereas the most effective method is going to be acid, very cheap, only 1,500 rupees we can get it treated. And additionally, we have to, once you do acid, you have to go additional treatment like bleaching. So if you are using 65% chlorine, it is very expensive. In India, it is like 84 rupees per kilo. So you have to spend almost 21,000. Whereas the same result you can achieve by giving excess dose like 500 kgs, but your cost would be 8,000 rupees when you are using 35% chlorine. So I suggest you can go with 35% chlorine and higher doses to save money. And because we are increasing contact time like 2 or 3 days, so this dose would be good enough. And potassium permanganate, which is very expensive, almost around 17,000 rupees, and formaldehyde also 19,000 rupees. So the thing is, you cannot outright take my slide or outright take my suggestion and apply the same doses. You have to see the possibility and feasibility, whether this particular chemical can be done on that soil, whether they have any problem on the soils. So we have to see the possibility and feasibility, economic feasibility also. So some of the chemicals very expensive, and already the farmer is in trouble. You cannot simply recommend all the doses at a higher level. So we have to study both the cases. So dosage, contact time, application method, and these treatments can be suggested by your technical advisor. And one disclaimer, what I want to say is, whatever you do, you cannot expect that this particular treatments can kill 100% practically on the field, because in the lab it can happen. Madam from McDowell University, we have a clear statement that all these chemicals are very, very much effective in the lab. But on field, I say there are many problems. It would be very difficult to achieve that 100%. So once you do that, you have to go for water treatment. I think you can have better understanding. Once you are using surface water, you have to go with potassium permanganate treatment at 2 ppm and polyaluminum chloride at 6 ppm. So one most important thing is you have to allow this water after treatment, after potassium permanganate and pack. What happens is this water becomes flocculent. It can entrap the spores, and you have to allow them to settle. So you should have a lot of barriers in your reservoir pond, so the water becomes water movement becomes very slow, and it becomes the spores will settle somewhere in these heights, in these barriers. So always use the surface water for treatment, further treatment. So you have to go for 10 to 20 ppm or up to 30 ppm of chlorination for further stocking. So once you do this harsh treatment, you have to rejuvenate your water. So I think you can get this information. You can download this. So this is the formula. You have to use fermented rice bran at various things. So applying dose and frequency, you can start like 3 days, every 3 days until stocking, and 15 days of stocking, and later on to 5 days. So this slide you can download and go through. So one more important thing is take care of biosecurity. We have to be very careful about crab fence and bird fence. You have to be very, very close. Even for white spot or EHP, you have to be very, very particular about biosecurity. And especially when you are trying to do sampling, or when you are entering into the farm, you try to disinfect each and every equipment, nets, tubs, everything, your hands, whatever you go into contact with the animal, you have to treat them with either potassium permanganate or iodine. This is very, very important. And the most important thing I'm going to explain is you have to observe. Once the EHP has already entered into the pond, how you are going to handle. You have to just observe the true feed consumption and periodic growth. So why I say true is, sometimes even the chick tray consumption is low, some farmers tend to push more feed so that they expect it will grow better, but it is not correct. We have to consider that once the EHP infected in the pond, so growth and survival are almost inversely proportional. So once you have better growth, you may see lower survival or opposite. So in that case, you have to harvest as soon as possible. I will try to explain in my coming slide. So I had divided this EHP infection into three phases for better understanding. So these slides are very critical for everyone. You have to understand this. So for the first condition is caution, mean we have to be very careful from here. So the visible symptoms, you don't have any white faces, mean no white faces are there, no lucial or mortality, but you got a PCR positive EHP stock in the pond. So what we have to do is keep observing how is the feed consumption. So if the feed consumption is good and go with the periodic growth, when you go for a sampling and you see that expected growth is there, like 2.5 gram a week, so you can consider this as a normal consequence and you can just continue the crop further. But if opposite, if the feed consumption is less and periodic growth is low, so you can see the situation is alarming. So you can go further, but you have to be like every 1 or 2 weeks, you have to review your decisions. You cannot just blindly continue the crop, but you have to review every 2 weeks. And the second condition is called alarming condition. This is very important, where most of the farmers miss the chance of spreading or handling the pond. So you have visible symptoms like white feces has appeared sometime, but it has disappeared. Meanwhile, either you use medicine or you don't use medicine, the white feces has reduced, and you don't have any lucial or mortality. This is called second phase. In this second phase, as long as the feed consumption is good and but you don't have enough periodic growth, so what happens is there is a chance that FCR can increase. So you have to harvest based on the size and market situation. If the market situation is favoring like smaller pounds, you better harvest instead of proceeding further. Because we cannot assure the market condition, and you cannot assure big crop with this infection. And the second case, what happens is if the feed consumption is less but periodic growth is very good. So this is opposite thing. You may have severe survival loss. So where from this growth is coming without feeding, you are seeing survival loss in the pond. Even in that case also, you have to harvest by size and price. So you have to calculate, put on a paper what is our biomass and what is our expenses, whether we can recover our expenses or not. If you can recover our expenses, it is good, better to harvest. So this is all about condition 2. And the last condition is condition 3, and this is called emergency, because we have severe white feces and there is severe to moderate lucial and mortality in the pond. So in this case, generally what happens is feed consumption will be less. But if you see that periodic growth is good, even in this condition, the consequence is you may see huge survival loss, up to like 30 to 40% survival loss may be there. So you have to harvest as soon as possible. You cannot proceed further. So like within 2 or 3 days, you have to harvest to save further survival loss. And another case is feed consumption may be good or may not be good, but if the periodic growth is less, you are going to lose survival. At the same time, your FCR is also going high. I know some farms which where the FCR went up to 3 or 4, 1:4 ratio. So that is very, very high, and you have to go for emergency harvest. So this is all how we are going to handle, and there are many growth promoters, probiotics, immunostimulants, vitamins, whatever they are there in the market. They can help you as a prophylactic use. You cannot treat white feces. You cannot really treat white feces. So we have to use them from the beginning as a course, and you consider that they work as prophylactic measure. But even Dr. Rajiv Shah's presentation, he was very much clear that most of the things are prophylactic. There is no proper cure or therapy available for EHP till date. So don't believe in false claims that most of the products have EHP cure within their product. So other thing is do some periodic water exchange and remove sludge from the pond. But always remember, don't release this water and sludge directly into the creeks or open surfaces. Put in your ETS system. You should have a sludge pond to handle this. Otherwise, don't do this. So that is about. So there are gray areas. I have given some information, but there are gray areas like treatments. So we do good treatments, but what happens is these open and earthen ponds are very big, and you may have a lot of snails, debris, equipments, bushes, grass in the open earthen ponds. So this treatment may not be reachable. So you give whatever treatment spraying on the surface, it may not reach all the points of the pond, so you may not achieve that 100% of spore inactivation. So that is one gray area which is really alarming now. water treatment protocol, even I explained all that chemical treatment, PP pack and chlorination, it doesn't really assure that we can prevent EHP by 100%. And one important thing is broodstock and genetics. This is a very big area which we didn't really get through. So some genetics like they are really performing good. Even with EHP, we didn't see much survival loss and they're growing normal. And some genetics, with all our effort, also they didn't really perform well. So this area we have to improve. There are some tolerant to work on this, and this is one area which we have to this is very, very important. So this is the gray area. Many people blame the labs and hatcheries or even themselves that EHP is not detected properly in the lab because pH or they blame that PCR is not able to detect EHP. But that is not the case. We have to have a collective effort. You have to collect the right sample. At the same time, you have to do in a right way in the lab. So see what happens is in between the larval rearing tank cells, you may have one positive tank out of 40, but after you get a negative result from the PCR lab, meanwhile they may get contaminated from the tank to tank because they may use the same equipment without treating them properly. So there is a chance there, and finally there is no indicator until visual symptoms appear. So you have to depend on long-term prophylaxis, which is very cumbersome and very economical, very difficult because seeing the current price situation, we cannot do the prophylactic treatment for long time, and there is no therapy also. So unless and until you have visible symptoms, you cannot know that you have EHP infection in the pond. And once the visible symptoms appear, it is very late for us to treat. The workaround is you have to check more times of to ensure that you are getting EHP seed. Then a very important thing is you have to reduce the stocking densities. You have to stock larger PL from biosecure nursery. If at all possible, if there is a nursery system, this definitely helps because you rear them for extra 20 days in a closed environment. You can have better diagnosis, whatever complaints you have that you are not able to detect in smaller PL. Yes, you have in your nursery, you can go and check there. So you have another 25 days of extra time there to get the proper negative seed. Then you definitely this exponential growth helps once it stunts in the nursery. In the grow out, it helps, and you may have safe production. So strict monitoring of feeding program and weekly growth, which I mentioned earlier just now, and I request no, don't use any fancy or expensive products to control EHP. So I repeatedly told it cannot be a therapeutic. So you shouldn't go for an expensive thing. You can go for any home remedies or natural remedies. That is fine, but you cannot go for an expensive product. So and timely decision. This is one major important factor to be considered. You have to decide in time for harvest. And based on this market situation, now you see the production costs are very, very high, and market is crashing every day. So it would be very difficult for us to survive if we go without properly monitoring the issues. So hope I have given you good information, and this ends my presentation. And thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Sharam, and all the admins and all our group members who are waiting for a long time for this. And hope we have a good discussion here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your nice presentation. Dr. Nasser, are you in? Do you have any comment? If you have,
I'm
please.
here, Ram.
Oh,
I'm here.
good afternoon. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Go ahead. I think the other people can ask, and then I will sum up in the end because they are more practical oriented. We do not have EHP in Saudi Arabia, so I'm
Okay,
actually
thank you.
not
Thank
sure
you so
about what
much.
to be done.
Thank you. Okay, dear participants, if you have any question, please raise your hand or you can write, and Mr. Madhu can answer. Any question? I think your presentation was very complete, so maybe no question.
That is right. A very good presentation, Doctor.
Yeah, one of the best in our series.
Yes, agree. One thing, Dr. Madhu, is that basically people ignore the biosecurity at the first stage and then end up a lot. I mean, I just commented on this for the future presentation by one of our speakers as
Yes.
well, is that we ignore the basics and then it becomes a big problem, and then we end up spending more money. It would be better, Doctor, if we can just explain the biosecurity with special reference to EHP.
Yeah. I think that would be a big topic. So we can have a separate session for
Yes,
biosecurity.
yes, yes, certainly,
That-
certainly. That is the key, because most of the people where we know of a recognized farm, they have systems of monitoring of the brood stock. They have getting polychaetes, frozen polychaetes, not live polychaetes, from very certified people. Because with WSSV, with all the other diseases, we already saw that it comes from live feeding of wild and collected from other places. This is almost 20, 25 years old system, but still we continue to get lower source of or lower cost of Artemia biomass. We get lower source of polychaetes, which leads to these problems. I hope our friends in the group really understands the importance of this, because they a few dollars saved initially, and then you end up losing lot of money at the end in treatment and also in loss of time.
So here is a question. Shall we assume EHP infected if there is white feces in the culture pond? Yes, you can assume, but you cannot confirm. You have to get it confirmed only by PCR, because most of the cases, most like above 90% EHP is associated with white feces. But there is clear paper that EHP is not the only reason for white feces. I think Dr. Amarnani will elaborate in his next presentation. So white feces, there are various causes. It is a multi-bacterial, multi-pathogen associated. It is a complex disorder, but EHP is one among them, and I think we have to consider as major reason. So I can say that if there is white feces in the pond today in India, with my experience, I can say there is a chance of having EHP positive above 90%. Yeah, you have to get it checked to get it confirmed.
Okay, thank you. I must say hello to Dr. Cynthia, the next presenter for tomorrow. Welcome, Dr. Cynthia. And Madhu, I have highlighted the question. You can see with orange color, and please.
Yeah. Just I answered this. I
Okay,
finished that
then
one
I have
question.
find another one. You can go and up and finding the questions.
Yes, this is one interesting question I have seen now. Relationship between EHP and AHP and D. Actually, there is a very strong association so far, but in India we didn't have AHP in India, but we have various vibrios which are directly, which doesn't cause EMS in India, but still the vibrios are very closely associated with EHP. As I told you earlier, vibrio can be a normal microbiota in the pond, but they can become opportunistic. And once after this EHP enters into the system, that will become more susceptible. The animal becomes more susceptible to this opportunistic vibrios. So likewise, same thing can happen with the AHP-ND also, because we didn't have much experience with AHP in India. I'm not ready to comment on that. But taking the experience from Thailand or Malaysia or any other country which suffered with AHP-ND, they couldn't recover because they fought AHP-ND and they were able to revive from AHP-ND, but they couldn't handle EHP because EHP is the major killer. AHP can be handled. AHP-ND can be handled. So it's like they work together. EHP and AHP-ND work together always, but EHP is the main problem. EHP entry into the hepatopancreas, the signs. No, that's what we couldn't notice. Unless you do histology in the laboratory, by yourself, like you suspect something is wrong with the animal, but you don't have any visual signs until the symptoms appear, like the hepatopancreatic cells damage, and you see some some cells getting excreted. You can see some of the intestines have discoloration. So only from there we'll suspect that there is something wrong with this animal, and we send that particular animal for testing. But with blind eye, with naked eye, I think we cannot judge what is happening in the hepatopancreas simply before the infection. Any other question? At what pH level EHP spore will be eradicated from soil and water? As per Dr. Kalay's presentation, that is very good information what we have from Mahidol University, Thailand. So above 9.5 pH, they were able to achieve spore polar tube extrusion by 95%. So you should have a 9.5 pH and above. But the thing is, they worked in the lab. That's what I tried to explain there. Inside the lab, you can achieve a 9.5 pH, and you can prove that it is going to have this polar tube extrusion successfully. But on field, on the soil or in the water, it is very, very difficult to achieve the same pH after getting treated, because once it touches the soil, once the solution, you prepare a solution of 9.5 and put it in the soil interaction can reduce the pH, or it can damage the soil characters. So you cannot simply raise the pH of the soil like 12, but you do the best like above 10. You try to push the treatment above 10, so that your ultimate soil treated pH will be like above 9.5. It must be effective. 2 years ago, this is happened in our farm. We treat it by changing.
Madhu, please wait. Dr. Jamir, please ask your question. Dr. Jamir, please activate your microphone. I think your microphone has problem. Okay, please, another question. 2 years.
So they say that this disease happened in our farm. We treat it by changing food. Is it take care? Maybe some we have some experiences like that, like changing the feed brands or feed course. It is like helping to some extent. I mean, it is not proven to really cure or care about EHP, but just you can have a time like another 1 week or 10 days where you can try different things, but they are not proven to work. Any other question?
Thank you, Mr.
Excuse me.
Haraji. Mr. Haraji, please ask your question
Yes,
in English.
I want to ask that you have already mentioned that maybe the squid, maybe the polycat worm, or all of these may be host. Even the squid can be the host or carrier.
Yes, yes. Polychaetes are the active carriers for EHP. It is proven that polychaetes carry EHP, and others like mollusks or snails, they are proven to be like mechanical carriers by physical adherence. They can carry into the pond. Yeah, they are all carriers.
Even squid.
Yeah, squid. Fresh feeds, they say fresh feeds, because
Okay,
once they
thank
come
you.
into contact, once EHP comes into contact, whatever, like you see, you cannot label that even a glass of water can contaminate, because it resides on the surfaces. So if you put these squids along with some contaminated material, yeah, they can carry. So they're called mechanical carriers. So you put anything into contact with the EHP spore and feed them to the animal, they can carry. Yes.
Thank you very
Brahmakumar.
much. Thank you.
Thank you. Up to what extent
Question.
Vibrio is related with the EHP? Yes, actually, I didn't term the Vibrio today, but that is when I call it opportunistic pathogen, I can say 99% it is all about Vibrio. So, because that is a very big subject, I didn't really put Vibrio into the picture. But EHP alone, if EHP alone is a problem, but EHP associated with Vibrio is a major problem. So you cannot really recover from crop loss if EHP and Vibrios are associated together.
Okay, the last question, please. From Deb Subrata.
Yeah, I think this is only appreciation message. Thank you, Subrata. Yeah.
Has 2 questions. Please go ahead.
Where is the question? I didn't see the question.
First, how here, doctor, please.
Somebody can read for me. I couldn't see the question.
How reliable are our testing centers doing PCR? Can we make a decision based on their report? This is the first question.
Yes, yes. I suggest every farmer, and actually, my entire presentation is targeting both farmer and technical people who visit the farmer and give them knowledge every day, because they have to have one understanding. If you have anything, if you notice something wrong with the performance, with the feeding, with the behavior of the animal, you bring that particular suspect animal, whatever you suspect. When you sample, you may see that out of 100 or 200 animals in your tub, you may see that 1 or 2 animals are abnormal. So I suggest you bring them to the lab and get it tested before doing any treatments, because all these treatments and care are going to be very, very expensive. So take a good decision just by doing one PCR. PCR really helps to handle the situation. Can EH be cured if we can adding lipid with bile acid and put more enzyme in our feed? See, it's like as I told you, they're all prophylactic. Mean EHP cannot be cured. There is no medicine and there is no cure for EHP so far till today. Whatever they claim that there is a cure for EHP, even a recent article, but they say it's very, very difficult because these biomolecules cannot really get into the EHP spore. But you can mitigate, you can try, you can give a prophylactic treatment whenever as I told you, we have 3 different conditions. Condition number 1, you can do prophylaxis, you can try all these bile acids, growth promoters, probiotics. Even in condition 2, you have to be wisely thinking. At condition 2, you may have to harvest, but if your market is not really helping you and you have to push forward for another 1 week, so that time also you can try, but they are not meant to cure EHP. You can try to mitigate the situation to help going further, like another 1 week or 10 days. That's all. They are not absolute cure for EHP. How does the salinity and temperature affect the mortality rate in culture pond? Yes, this is one important thing. Definitely in high salinity and high temperature, like in India, we have summer temperatures very high. They're very strongly associated with high mortality. So we see this especially either EHP affected ponds or even non-affected ponds. Based on that, based on the carrying capacity, stocking density of your pond, you may see very high mortality in high temperatures and high salinity. Yeah, there is a possibility.
Okay, our time has finished. Thank you so much for your nice presentation, Madhu.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Sharam, and all our colleagues here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Madhu. Thank you. Take care.